My name is Pauline, and I am 67 years old. For 40 years, I believed I knew the texture of my life as well as I knew the grain of the old oak table in my kitchen. It was solid, polished by time, and reliably there. That belief held steady right up until a cool Tuesday morning last October, when a single slip of paper fluttering from my husband's old fishing manual, like a fallen leaf, changed everything. It was a receipt for a diamond tennis bracelet from a jeweler in the city. The date was 3 weeks past. It was not for our anniversary. It was not for me. Before I share how that small piece of paper began to unravel the tapestry of my life thread by painful thread, I wonder about the space you're in right now. Are you listening from a cozy kitchen like mine, or maybe during a quiet moment on your commute? If stories of quiet strength and unexpected turns resonate with you, I warmly invite you to join our community here. Please take a second to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It truly helps more people find these shared journeys. The morning I found the receipt, I had been looking for a notepad. Gregory, my husband, had complained the night before that his favorite pen was missing, and I thought it might have gotten tucked into one of his many manuals. He was a man of systems, my Gregory. Or the man I thought was my Gregory. He had a place for everything from his tax law journals to his fly fishing gear. Our home Vinewood estate reflected that order. It was a beautiful, sprawling property in the Sonoma Valley that had been in my family for 3 generations. The main house was built of warm river stone and redwood with windows that looked out over rows of grapevines that rolled toward the hills like green corduroy. That particular morning, the light was the kind of pale gold that makes everything look softly focused, and the air through the screen door carried the scent of damp earth and ripening fruit. I felt a deep, settled gratitude. That was my first mistake, I suppose. Believing that gratitude was a permanent state like the mountains in the distance. My parents left me Vinewood. They were pragmatic, hardworking people who loved this land more than anything. My father especially was a steward, not just an owner. When I married Gregory 40 years ago, my father liked him well enough. Gregory was ambitious, sharp, a young lawyer with a promising future. But Dad had a cautious glint in his eye. He sat us both down one evening, his hands permanently stained with soil resting on his knees. "Pauline," he said, "this land is your anchor. It will protect you." He looked right at Gregory. "And it will protect itself." I remember Gregory laughing easily, clapping my father on the shoulder. "Don't you worry, sir," he said. "I'll take good care of your girl and her vines." We all signed a mountain of papers around that time. Trusts, agreements, things that swam before my young, in-love eyes as legal jargon. My father insisted. Gregory signed cheerfully, calling it wise planning. I signed trusting both of them. I filed it all away in the old leather portfolio in the study and thought little more of it. The anchor was out of sight, holding fast deep below the surface of our daily lives. Gregory built a successful career as a tax attorney. He was good at it, precise, persuasive. He provided well. We raised 2 children here who are now grown with lives of their own back east. Over the decades, Gregory took on the role of the manor lord. He oversaw every major renovation, the new limestone fireplace, the French doors to the terrace, the upgraded irrigation system for the North Vineyard block. He never asked my opinion on the costs or the contractors. He simply presented the plans as a fait accompli. I didn't mind, not really. I was busy with the gardens, with volunteering, with the intricate social fabric of a small wine country community. I told myself his take-charge attitude was a form of love, of shouldering the burden. I saw his pride in Vinewood as shared pride. Now, standing in the silent study with that jewelry receipt trembling in my hand, I wondered what else I had mistaken for love. I did something out of character then. I carefully placed the receipt back exactly where I found it. I closed the manual, and I began to watch. It was a subtle, sickening shift from living my life to auditing his. I noticed his phone, which used to live on his desk, was now a permanent appendage. He took calls in the other room, his voice a low murmur. There were new weekend fishing trips with old college buddies I had never heard him mention before. He bought new clothes, casual, expensive shirts that seemed too young for him. When I softly asked about a charge on our shared credit card for a fancy steakhouse in Santa Rosa, he looked momentarily stunned, then waved a hand. Taking a potential client out, sweetheart. You know how it is. The deal didn't pan out, but the dinner was a necessary expense. His tone was so smooth, so plausible. I wanted to believe him, so I did. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew thorns. A week later, over a dinner of roasted chicken that tasted like sawdust in my mouth, Gregory mentioned a name. Diana, an old colleague from his firm's San Francisco office. Brilliant woman, he said, spearing a green bean. Going through a nasty divorce. Lost her shirt. Might need a place to stay for a bit while she gets back on her feet. I felt a cold trickle down my spine. Oh, I managed. That's too bad. He didn't look up from his plate. Yeah. Told her we might have some space. You know, the guest cottage could use an occupant. It was a statement, not a question. The silence that followed was new. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of two people who know each other's thoughts. It was a thick, heavy silence full of words he wasn't saying, and fears I couldn't yet voice. It was the silence of the ground giving way inch by imperceptible inch. The guest cottage. He said it so casually, as if suggesting we rent it to a nice graduate student. The cottage was my sanctuary, a little stone building at the edge of the rose garden where I painted in the summers. The idea of a stranger there felt like a violation. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay beside Gregory, listening to his steady, untroubled breathing, and stared at the moonlight making patterns on the ceiling. Who was this man? Had the last 40 years been a performance? My mind raced, stitching together tiny clues. The faint, unfamiliar floral scent on his jacket last week. His sudden interest in modern art, after a lifetime of preferring landscapes, the way he had snapped at me 2 days ago for moving a stack of his magazines. The frustration in his voice had a new contemptuous edge. I needed an outside perspective, but the thought of telling my friends was suffused with shame. How could I, Pauline, the woman with the perfect vineyard estate and the successful husband, admit my marriage might be a carefully constructed lie? Instead, I turned to Marta, our house manager. She had been with us for 30 years, a kind, observant woman from Portugal who loved Vinewood almost as much as I did. The next morning, while she was polishing the silver, I wandered into the pantry, feigning a search for tea. Marta, I began, my voice strangely tight. Has Mr. Gregory seemed different to you lately? She paused, her cloth hovering over a creamer. She chose her words with the care of someone navigating a minefield. He is very busy, Mrs. Pauline. Many phone calls. He is often in a hurry when he comes and goes. Last Thursday, he left very late, past 9. He said he had a meeting in the city. Her dark eyes met mine, full of unspoken knowledge. She had seen the late-night departures, heard the tense phone conversations. Thank you, Marta, I whispered, my throat closing. It is my job to see, she said, simply returning to her work. And it is my job to care for this house. And for you. Her words were a lifeline and a confirmation. I wasn't imagining things. The floor I was standing on was indeed cracking. I decided I needed proof, something more concrete than a receipt and a changed demeanor. With a heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, I logged into our joint banking account online. I rarely did this. Gregory handled the finances. The transactions loaded on the screen, and there it was in stark black and white. The steakhouse charge was there, but so were others. A boutique hotel in Healdsburg on a night he told me he was working late at the office. Multiple charges from a high-end florist, several large withdrawals of cash, and then another jeweler's charge, this one even larger than the bracelet, from a place in San Francisco. The narrative of a struggling old colleague suddenly seemed ludicrous. This was the spending pattern of a man in the throes of a new all-consuming romance. Fueled by a grief that was starting to curdle into anger, I confronted him that evening. I printed the statements, my hand steady with a strange, cold fury. When he walked in, loosening his tie, I placed them on the kitchen island. Gregory, we need to talk about these. He glanced at them, and his face went through a rapid transformation, surprise calculation, then a stormy indignation. You've been spying on me. His voice was low and dangerous. It's our joint account, I said, my own voice surprisingly calm. I'm concerned about these expenses. They're significant. He snatched the papers, his eyes scanning them. Then he did what I now realize he was an expert at. He pivoted. He became the victim. Pauline, after everything I've done for this family, for you I have worked my fingers to the bone for 40 years to give you this life. He swept his arm around, encompassing the beautiful kitchen, the view. And you have the gall to audit me like some suspicious accountant. These are business expenses. Networking. Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under to maintain our standing? The word "our" hung in the air, poisoned. His performance was masterful. He made me feel small, petty, ungrateful. The anger drained out of me, replaced by a familiar, weary desire for peace. I'm sorry, I heard myself say the words "ash" in my mouth. I was worried. He came around the island, his anger subsiding into a patronizing warmth. He put a hand on my shoulder. Don't worry your pretty head about finances, Paulie. That's my job. Just trust me. I had trusted him for 40 years, and in that moment I hated myself for the part of me that still wanted to. A few days later, he made good on his mention of Diana. He invited her for dinner. She needs a good home-cooked meal, he said. Be nice, Pauline. She's had a rough time. Diana arrived in a cloud of overpowering perfume and a silk blouse that seemed better suited to a cocktail lounge than a country dinner. She was in her early 50s, with the sharp, meticulously maintained beauty of a woman fighting a relentless battle with time. She kissed Gregory on the cheek a beat too long and turned to me with a dazzling, empty smile. Pauline, Greg has told me so much about you. And this place? Oh my God, it's even more stunning in person. I could just die. She toured the house as if she were a prospective buyer, running her fingers over the marble countertops, admiring the views from each window, critiquing the furniture layout with backhanded compliments. This formal living room is fabulous, but don't you think it's a bit underutilized? You could really open up this space. Gregory watched her with a fond, dopey smile I had never seen directed at me. Over dinner, she held court, talking loudly about real estate deals and mutual acquaintances from Gregory's firm whose names I didn't recognize. She called him Greg, a nickname I had never used. I sat there pushing my food around my plate, playing the part of the gracious, slightly dull homemaker. I felt like a ghost in my own dining room. After they left, Gregory walked her to her car, a departure that took 15 minutes. Marta came to find me. I was mechanically loading the dishwasher. Mrs. Pauline, she said quietly. I took the recycling out to the bin. They were by her car. They were holding hands. He kissed her on the mouth. It was not a friendly kiss. I didn't cry. The grief had gone too deep for tears. It had hit bedrock. I just nodded, my hand resting on the cool granite countertop. Thank you, Marta. That night, lying awake again, I made a promise to the silent house and to the memory of my father. I would not disappear. I would not be eased out of my own life. I was the steward of Vinewood. It was time I remembered what that truly meant. The next morning, I called Howard Brennan. He was my father's lawyer, then my family's lawyer, and had become a dear friend. His voice, a dry, reassuring rasp, came over the line. Pauline, to what do I owe the pleasure? Ready to update that dusty old will of yours. Howard, I said, my voice carefully even, I wonder if I could come into the city to see you. I'd like to review some of the estate paperwork, the trust documents, the property titles. I feel I should understand them better. There was a slight pause on the other end. Of course, my dear. Anytime. How about tomorrow at 10? The drive to San Francisco felt like crossing into a different world. Howard's office was all dark wood and leather, smelling of old books and pipe tobacco. He rose from his enormous desk, a tall, stooped man with kind eyes behind thick glasses. Now, he said, settling me in a chair. What's brought on this sudden interest in probate law trouble in Paradise? I couldn't meet his eye. Let's just say I'm doing some due diligence. He nodded slowly, a lifetime of discretion in the gesture. He called for his assistant to pull the Vinewood file. It arrived, a thick accordion-style folder bulging with decades of paper. "Let's start with the core," he said, extracting a bound document. "The Vinewood Family Trust, established by your parents with you as the primary beneficiary and successor trustee." He flipped pages. "Here's the amendment from just before your marriage, adding certain spousal provisions." He pointed to a clause. Gregory was granted a life estate and the property, the right to live there for the rest of his life. But critically, Howard's finger tapped the page. He was not named a co-trustee. "You are the sole trustee, Pauline. You have always been the sole trustee. The title to the land, the house, every outbuilding is held in the name of the trust which you control." He flipped further. "He has no power to sell, mortgage, or transfer any interest in the property. Any major expenditure or alteration technically requires trustee approval, your signature." I stared at him, the words sinking in. He always acted like it was his. He paid the property taxes, he managed the renovations. Howard gave a soft, lawyerly snort. "He paid them from your joint marital funds, to which you contributed equally through the management and inheritance of the asset. As for the renovations, he may have written the checks, but did you sign any contractor agreements? Permits?" I thought back. "No. He handled all of that. Legally, those were gifts of labor and materials to the trust," Howard said. "Improvements to your separate property. The trust is a fortress, Pauline. Your father built it that way. He loved Gregory, but he loved you more. He wanted to ensure you always had a home no matter what." A wave of emotion, profound gratitude for my father's foresight, and a fierce rising sense of power washed over me. So I said, my voice growing stronger, "If I were to ask Gregory to leave?" Howard steepled his fingers. "As trustee, you have the absolute right to revoke his life estate for cause. Adultery, financial malfeasance, attempting to alienate the property, all more than sufficient cause. You would send a formal notice, and if he refused, we would file for an eviction. It would be very straightforward." We talked for another hour. He advised me to secure all the original documents which I had in the house safe. He suggested I start quietly separating finances, opening a personal account, moving half of our liquid savings, which I was legally entitled to. Document everything, he said. Keep a journal. Save any evidence of the affair. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I left his office a different woman. The ground had stopped shifting. I was standing on the bedrock my father had laid. I drove back to Sonoma, the fog rolling over the Golden Gate Bridge behind me, feeling a clarity I hadn't known in years. When I walked back into Vinewood, I didn't see just my home. I saw my domain. The limestone fireplace Gregory had been so proud of commissioning was an improvement to my asset. The French doors were an enhancement to my property. The shift was seismic. I was no longer a betrayed wife cowering in the corner of her own life. I was the commander of the fortress, and I hadn't even known I was standing on the battlements. The atmosphere in the house grew colder, though the autumn sun was warm. Gregory became increasingly distant, then subtly hostile. He began to criticize Vinewood itself, something he had never done. "This place is a money pit, Pauline," he'd grumble, looking out the window. "Too much land to maintain. The house is too big for 2 people. We're not getting any younger. We should think about downsizing. There's a stunning penthouse listing in Jackson Square." It was Diana's language, her city slicker aesthetic, coming out of his mouth. He was laying the groundwork. I would just nod noncommittally. Let him talk. I was busy. I met with our vineyard manager to discuss plans for the next growing season, taking a more active role. I opened a private bank account in a town 20 miles away and initiated the transfer of funds. I began a journal in a simple composition notebook, logging dates, times, overheard phone snippets, and my observations. It was a cold clinical process that kept the hot grief at bay. The climax came on a Friday afternoon. Gregory came home early. He was dressed not in his usual weekend casuals, but in sharp slacks and a crisp shirt, like he was going on a date. He poured himself a scotch, something he only did when bracing for something difficult. Pauline, we need to talk, he said, not meeting my eyes. I think we both know this marriage has run its course. We've been living as strangers for years. I remained silent, sitting in my wingback chair by the fireplace, my hands folded in my lap. It's time for a clean break, he continued, gaining confidence from my silence. A civilized separation. I've spoken to Diana. She's in a very vulnerable position. He took a sip. So here's what I've arranged. She'll be moving into the main house this weekend. It's absurd for her to be in some cramped apartment when we have all this space going to waste. I felt a surreal calm settle over me. Go on. You can have the East Wing sitting room, he said, as if offering a grand concession. Marta can fix it up as a bedroom for you. Or, he added with a magnanimous wave, you could go stay with Sarah in Boston for a few months. Get some distance. We'll figure out the divorce details amicably later. I looked at him, this man I had shared a bed and a life with for 4 decades, as he casually handed down my eviction notice from my own home to make room for his mistress. The audacity was so colossal, it almost seemed like a parody. Let me see if I understand you, Gregory, I said, my voice eerily quiet. You are moving your girlfriend into my house, and you expect me to either hide in a converted sitting room or leave entirely. He finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. Our house, Pauline. Our house. I have paid for every single upgrade, every property tax bill, every stone in this damn place for 40 years. I think you should be grateful I'm letting you stay at all. Now Diana needs a fresh start. It's her turn. Her turn. Those 2 words hung in the air, the ultimate erasure. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply stood up. I walked to the antique secretary desk in the corner, the one that had been my mother's. I unlocked the bottom drawer with a small key I wore on a chain around my neck. I pulled out the aged leather portfolio. I carried it back to where he stood, placed it on the coffee table between us, and opened it to the first tab section. This, I said, tapping the top document, is the Vinewood Family Trust, executed 3 months before our wedding, signed by my father, my mother, me, and you. I suggest you reread it. Focus on sections 4A and 7B. He stared at the folder as if it were a live snake. What nonsense is this? It's the nonsense that means you do not own and have never owned a single square inch of this soil, Gregory. You were granted a revocable life estate. I am the sole trustee. I control the trust. I own every room, every acre, every vine. Legally and completely. His face went through a horrifying palette of colors, confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, then rage. He snatched up the document, his eyes frantically scanning the dense legalese. This is... You can't be serious. That's ancient history, community property. I've invested my life here. Your investments were in a property you never had title to, I replied. As for community property, Howard Brennan is prepared to explain it to you and any judge you care to stand before. The trust is ironclad. You are a resident here at the pleasure of the trustee, and my pleasure has just expired. At that exact moment, the front door opened. Diana's bright, caring voice echoed in the foyer. Greg, darling, I'm here. The movers will be right behind me. I just couldn't wait. She swept into the living room, a suitcase in each hand, her face alight with triumph. She stopped short, seeing the scene, Gregory pale and wild-eyed, clutching the trust document. Me standing perfectly still. Oh, she said, her smile faltering. Am I interrupting? Gregory looked from the papers in his hand to her, to me. The foundation of his entire presumptuous world had just vaporized. And in that suspended silent moment, with the late afternoon sun slicing through the windows, all 3 of us knew it. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk outside. Diana's smile had completely dissolved, replaced by a confused frown. What's going on, Greg? She dropped her suitcases with a thud. Gregory found his voice, but it was a splintered, desperate thing. This is... This is a technicality, Pauline. A piece of paper. I'll fight this. I'll get the best lawyers in the state. You think you can just throw me out after 40 years? The courts will see right through this scheme. I remained calm. Howard Brennan and his firm are on retainer. They've been preparing for this possibility since the day my father signed this trust. You're welcome to spend whatever you have left trying to contest it. I believe the legal term is fruitless and frivolous. His bravado cracked further. What do you mean, whatever I have left? I've moved 50% of our joint liquid assets to a separate account, as is my right, I informed him, to protect my interests. The trust owns the illiquid asset, the land. You'll be responsible for your own legal fees. Diana's confusion was turning to alarm. Greg, what is she talking about? You said this was our house. You said we were starting fresh here. He ignored her, his eyes locked on me with pure venom. You've been planning this, he hissed. You deceitful bitch. No, Gregory. I said, my voice low and firm. You planned this. You planned the affair. You planned to move her in. You planned to shunt me aside. I am simply executing the contingency plan my father put in place to protect me from exactly this kind of misfortune. Now I turn to Diana. I'm sorry you were misled, but you are not moving in. You need to leave. Now. She looked at Gregory, her face hardening. You lied to me. You pathetic lying old man. The unraveling was happening right before my eyes. Their alliance, built on flattery and fantasy, couldn't withstand the pressure of reality. They began to argue, their voices rising in a cacophony of accusation and blame. I walked to the house phone, a vintage rotary model on the desk, and picked up the receiver. What are you doing? Gregory snapped. I am calling the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, I said, dialing slowly, to report 2 individuals trespassing on and attempting to unlawfully occupy private property. Unless you both gather your things and leave this estate immediately. The finality in my tone cut through their squabbling. Diana grabbed her suitcases. I'm not staying here for this humiliation. She shot Gregory a look of pure disgust and click-clacked her way back out the front door without a backward glance. Gregory stood deflated and furious amidst the ruins of his own making. You'll regret this, Pauline. I doubt it, I said. You have 30 days to arrange for the removal of your personal belongings. You may do so between the hours of 10 and 2 on weekdays with Marta present. Any items not removed will be considered abandoned. Your keys, please. He stared at me, a stranger. Slowly he removed his key ring from his pocket, slid off the 2 keys to Vinewood, and dropped them on the table with a cold clink. Then he turned and walked out, following Diana into the falling dusk. I locked the door behind him. I engaged the deadbolt, a solid, satisfying sound. Then I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. There was no victory dance, no shout of triumph. There was a vast hollow silence and a profound exhaustion. But beneath that, like the first green shoot after a fire, was a feeling of absolute, unassailable safety. The fortress had held. The following weeks were a blur of necessary methodical action. Howard handled the formal revocation of Gregory's life estate and the commencement of divorce proceedings. With the trust as the centerpiece, the divorce was remarkably straightforward. California's community property laws had little to grip onto. The estate was my separate property preserved by the trust. The funds I had moved were a division of marital assets. Gregory was left with his retirement accounts, his car, and the crushing weight of his own legal bills. He tried to fight for spousal support, but my age and his substantial retirement income made it a non-starter. The judge, upon reviewing the trust documents and the evidence of his attempt to displace me, was not sympathetic. The divorce was final 6 months later. I heard through the brittle grapevine of mutual acquaintances that Gregory and Diana had rented a small, overpriced apartment in San Francisco. The relationship, it was said, did not survive the combined pressures of financial strain, mutual recrimination, and the loss of the vineyard fantasy. He became something of a cautionary tale in our local circle, the man who thought he was lord of the manor, only to find he was merely a guest who had overstayed his welcome. For me, the real work began after the legalities were settled. It was the work of reclaiming not just my house, but my life. The first thing I did was have Marta help me move my things back into the master bedroom. We aired it out, changed the linens, and I slept a full deep night for the first time in over a year. The next morning, I called a contractor, not one of Gregory's, and had the lock to the guest cottage changed. I didn't paint in there right away. I just sat in the quiet, listening to the bees and the roses, and let the space belong to me again. I became a student of my own domain. I met weekly with the vineyard manager, learning about rootstock and brix levels and canopy management. I started a small kitchen garden, getting my hands dirty in a way I hadn't since I was a girl. I reconnected with friends I had subtly drifted from during the tense years with Gregory. I joined a book club at the local library full of smart, funny women of a certain age who talked about more than just their grandchildren. I told my children the full, unvarnished truth. They were shocked, then furious on my behalf, and their unwavering support was a balm. One afternoon, while going through old boxes, I found a sketch pad for my college art classes. I'd been quite good once. I bought new charcoal and pastels. I started small sketching the gnarled trunk of the ancient oak by the pond. The focus it required was a form of meditation, pulling me out of the past and into the present moment, the play of light on bark. I also thought about legacy. My father had protected me with legal foresight. What could I do for others who might not have such a fortress? Using a portion of the vineyard's income, I established a small fund with the community foundation, the Vinewood Fresh Start Grant. It provides a modest annual scholarship to a woman over 50 in Sonoma County who wants to go back to school, learn a trade, or start a small business. It's not about revenge. It's about planting a seed for someone else's future stability the way my father did for me. Life at Vinewood settled into a new peaceful rhythm. The house no longer felt like a museum of a failed marriage. It felt like a home again, reflective of one person's tastes and comforts. I had the worn chintz sofa I loved reupholstered. I let the formal living room, the one Diana had critiqued, become a true library with overflowing bookshelves and a comfortable chair for reading. The silence, once so oppressive, became companionable. It was my silence to fill with music or audiobooks or the simple sound of the wind in the trees. I didn't get the fairy tale ending of a love that lasts a lifetime. I got something else, something more real and more durable. I got back my own narrative. I learned that the self I had folded and tucked away to be a wife had not disappeared. She had just been waiting, patient and strong, for me to remember she was there. It is 1.5 years to the day since Gregory walked out that door. I am sitting on the west porch as the sun begins its descent behind the Mayacamas Mountains, painting the sky in strokes of peach and lavender. My tea has gone cold in the cup, but I don't mind. The air is sweet with the scent of star jasmine and warm earth. A hummingbird zips to the feeder, its wings a blur of determined life. This is what peace feels like. It is not the absence of noise, but the presence of a deep inner quiet. The kind of quiet that allows you to hear your own thoughts again, to distinguish your own desires from the echoes of others' expectations. I learned that the most profound betrayal is not always the dramatic affair. It is the slow, steady betrayal of your reality by the person who promised to share it. It is being told the sky is green for so long that you start to doubt your own eyes. And I learned that the greatest protection is often not something loud and bold, but something quiet and meticulous, a promise on paper made long ago by someone who loved you enough to think ahead. Being a good partner should not mean erasing yourself. For decades, I confused kindness with surrender. I was endlessly kind, accommodating, trusting. In my 68th year, I learned to be clear, and I discovered that clarity about what is yours, what you will tolerate, what you deserve, is the ultimate form of kindness, first to yourself, and then paradoxically to everyone around you. The healing did not come from his regret, which I doubt he truly feels, or from her downfall. It came from the tangible, life-affirming acts of reclaiming my space. It came from planting a row of heirloom tomatoes and watching them thrive. It came from the sound of my own laughter echoing in the high ceilings of the empty house that was no longer empty. It was full of me. It came from the realization that the foundation I thought had crumbled beneath me was in fact the only thing that never budged an inch. So here I sit, on my porch, on my land. The story I spent 40 years writing with someone else turned out to have a different ending than I'd imagined. But it wasn't a tragedy. It was a long, sometimes painful lesson in where my true roots were planted. The vines outside have weathered frost and drought and heat. They are pruned back hard sometimes, but they always send out new growth in the spring, deeper and stronger. I understand them better now. The past is a finished chapter. The rest of the story, well, that is still mine to write. If this story of quiet reclamation resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered a strength you didn't know you had? Where do you find your own sense of peace and safety? Please share your reflections in the comments below. Your stories and insights are what make this community so special. If you found value in this journey, please give this video a like. It helps others find their way here. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and sharing this with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner fortress. Thank you for listening, for sharing this time with me. However your story unfolds, I wish you clarity, strength, and the deep, unshakable peace of knowing your own ground. Take good care.